If you value Larkin's videos and want him to make more, the description below tells how to donate. Thank you.
So the Queen of England just died, and I don't really care, and this video isn't about that. I'm not going to make a video offending a bunch of British people, telling them what I think about their royalty. Instead, I'm going to make this video to offend a bunch of Americans by saying what I think about their royalty. Now, you may say, what are you talking about? We don't have royalty in America. We have a constitutional republic. And well, we're going to examine whether that's actually true or not. You know, a lot of Americans rightfully make fun of the British for still having royalty and kings and queens and this old-fashioned silliness based on ridiculous superstitions. And some guy saying, I have the right to rule you. I am your king. And, you know, a bunch of peasants who didn't know any better and didn't know how to think would go, oh, yes, you're our lord and master. And one uppity peasant might say, what do you mean you're our king? How did you become king? What? You look like just a guy. I mean, your clothes are fancy and stuff, but you look like just a guy. How did you acquire the right to rule me? Well, you see, I'm the offspring of that guy, and he had the right to rule you. So now I do. First of all, that's some weird logic. Second of all, how did he get the right? Well, he was the offspring of some other guy who had the right to rule you. So that's how he got it. And before that, well, he was the offspring of some other guy. Okay, if we can skip a whole bunch of he was the offspring of some other guy, how did it start? Who gave the first one the right to rule everybody? I mean, it sounds like ridiculous mythology. And whether you want to believe it was some Motion bint who lobbed a scimitar at him, or, well, the Holy Church declared, this guy gets to rule you. We're appointing him king. God said he has the right to rule you, so now he does. And by the way, all of his offspring till the end of time get to rule the rest of you. Who, imagining themselves to be rational and logical, would still believe something that utterly ridiculous? Well, apparently a lot of people, maybe a lot of British, and maybe a lot of Americans. How dare you? We don't have royalty. What are you talking about? Imagine this. Now, this isn't what happened, but this is an analogy. So imagine this. Some king is sitting on his throne ruling people, and more peasants are getting uppity and saying, you're just some guy. You don't have the right to rule us. All these weird legends about whatever, or the church decided it, like the church of power-happy, corrupt psychos who took the word of a pacifist and decided that meant let's violently conquer the world. Interesting logic in and of itself. But if the church says, well, God said this guy gets the right to rule you, I'm not sure I believe that, say a lot of peasants. So the king on his throne says, this is going to be troublesome, because if they stop believing I'm their rightful king, things are going to get kind of nasty, because they don't really have enough thugs to keep them all in line by force if they get uppity. So I got to think of something better. So he talks with his counselors and advisors, and one of them says, hey, I have an idea. Whisper, whisper, whisper. So the next day, the king walks out and he says, okay, everybody, I know a bunch of you are kind of getting upset, and for some reason you're so horrible that you're doubting that I have the right to rule you. But anyway, be that as it may, I have some good news for you. I have 2 sons, and they're both power-happy psychopaths, but I have 2 sons, and I've decided that one is going to be the head of the Royal House of Elephant, and the other is going to be the head of Royal House of Donkey. And I'm going to let you guys choose which one is going to rule you. Isn't that awesome? Now you're in charge because you get to pick which one. And a lot of the peasants might go, oh, that's so awesome. Oh, our all-benevolent Lord and Master. But of course, there's still going to be some uppity peasant who goes, wait a minute, that's not any better. You're still giving us 2 power-happy psychos to choose from, and they're both your sons. Like, well, what's the difference? You're pretending there's a choice. We didn't choose this system. Like, you made up the notion that you get to decide who's going to rule us, And you deciding that we can choose between two doesn't make it any better. That's still ridiculous. That's still divine right of kings nonsense. So the king goes, ooh, darn it. I was hoping that was going to work. Wait, got to talk to my advisors. Okay, so instead of me just deciding which of my two sons is going to do it, we're going to get a whole bunch of people from the Royal House of Elephant and the Royal House of Donkey, and we're going to form these confusing political bodies and a few different ones, and we're going to make all these weird rituals in these gigantic stone buildings that you will ooh and ah over because they're so majestic and stuff. And we'll make a bunch of weird pseudo-religious rituals that we do. And now we have a magic piece of parchment, and this magic piece of parchment says that it's legitimate for us to say, you can choose between son A or son B and which one's going to rule you. Now it's legitimate because, hey, you can't doubt the magic piece of parchment, obviously, because it's holy and divine and you must bow to it and accept the outcome. And surely nobody can have a complaint about that. Now, by now, hopefully you can see where this is going. Nobody asked you before the Constitution was written. You didn't exist yet. They decided this document that we just scribbled, you didn't, and the vast majority of people who were here in the U.S. had nothing to do with that. But they just said, we, the people, we're going to pretend we speak on behalf of the people, are going to decide this is how there's going to be a ruling class, and it's going to have the right to rob you and control you in various ways. And then there's littler ruling classes underneath it, and we'll have this big, confusing combination of various bodies and organizations of politicians bossing you around at various levels, and like there'll be the littler ones and the big centralized federal one. But we have decreed, and look, magic parchment says it so, that they have the right to rule you, divine right of politicians. This is in line with God's will and yada, 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 and so on and so forth. And of course you have to believe it. And you get to choose between the Royal House of Elephants, the Republican Party, and the Royal House, the Democrats. And because we, the institution that imposes the entire system on you and tells you it's legitimate, let you choose between two sets of crooks that were chosen by the system that declared itself to have the right to rule, that means that you're kind of consenting to it, and that you're sort of in charge, right? Are they falling for this shit? Yeah, they fell for it. The U.S. Constitution, or constitutional republics in general, or democracy, is no better than the divine right of kings. It's no more rational. It's just a more complicated excuse. Because to say, God said so, people are going to go, I kind of doubt it. If some random guy came out today and said, oh, by the way, God said I'm your king, pretty sure nobody would believe him. But my father and his father and his father, way back there, somebody said they were king. Oh, okay, well, I'll say the British, and I say, ugh. But it's just as stupid and just insane, in fact, worse, when you pretend that not God, but a piece of parchment and some people who died ages ago, and the ink they scribbled, fabricated from mere humanity, the divine right of politicians, the right to rule. Because at least if you're saying, well, God gave me the right to rule, you're full of it, you're totally lying, but at least theoretically, the creator of the universe could appoint a ruler. The Constitution doesn't even have that lame excuse. It's just people. Well, we went and did a bunch of rituals and wrote some stuff, and now mere mortals became your royalty. They have the right to rule you. And they're going to go out there and they're going to talk about equality. Well, do you mean equality between us and you? Well, no, of course not. We're the royalty. We have the right to rob you and control you and boss you around and imprison you if you disobey us. We just mean equality amongst the peasants. But obviously, we're not equal. We're above you. We're not mere mortals. And just as kings used to refer to themselves as the crown as if they're magically some other entity. Well, the new crooks refer to themselves as the government. We're not just people bossing you around. We are representatives of the government created by these fine legal documents and yada yada. It's all bullshit, and it's no more rational. It's just more complicated than the excuse they used before. So yes, if you're an American, you still absolutely have royalty. And I'm not even talking about the fact that there are kind of bloodlines, the Bush dynasty and, the Kennedys and the Clintons. Like, it's all an inside gang who they choose from. Anyway, I'm not even talking about the bloodline stuff. You can get into that if you want to. I'm talking about there is an organization, an institution that declared itself to have the right to rule, and it keeps perpetuating that and telling you that, well, you have to do these rituals. This is how you choose which of our choices is going to rule you. You don't get to choose the choices because that would be chaos and mayhem. But we will select a couple puppets who will be loyal to the royal ruling class, and then you can choose, and we'll pretend that that meant it was your decision, and you consented to the outcome. And most of you are going to fall for that. And in fact, I'm sure there are a bunch of people watching this video. Oh, that's not the same at all. How dare you talk that way about the Constitution? Wow, it's almost like you speak that religiously. Like you have an emotional, psychological attachment to just some piece of parchment with ink on it. Why would that be? It's almost as if you believe in the divine right of politicians, as if you think no decent person would ever question the right to rule when it's carried out by the set of crooks that you were taught to revere and worshiping. Oh my God, the President of the United States. And I shook the hand of my congressman. Oh, you have royalty too. And they're just as corrupt, and they're just as creepy, and they're just as illegitimate as kings and queens were. The difference is you put up with more crap. You and the rest of humanity put up with more crap from democratically elected constitutional republics than humanity ever did from kings and queens. Yes, democratically elected constitutional republics are the most oppressive, murderous institutions in the history of the world. And if that gets your panties in a bunch, maybe it's because you have a blind religious faith in the American royalty instead of a rational, thought-out philosophy that figures out they're just people. Parchments and rituals and big stone buildings and weird titles and wearing robes and going, I pledge allegiance, doesn't make one human being have the right to rule somebody else. And if you laugh at the British for thinking that their monarchy means anything, and then you revere the Constitution, you've been had. You've been duped into worshiping a slightly different royalty, just as evil, just as destructive. By the way, if you doubt the statement that constitutional republics are the most destructive in the history of the world, first of all, compare what we have now in the U.S. to what we had in the colonies under King George III. They were 1,000 times freer than what we have now. But go read the constitutions of Soviet Union, the Weimar Republic, which turned into Nazi Germany, North Korea, Red China under Mao Zedong. Read all their constitutions and you'll see, wow, they let the people vote. They had a constitution which created this royalty that they pretended have the right to rule, but they even wrote in bills of rights. Every single one had a list of, here are the individual rights that we will never violate. Of course, every single one of them, including here, violates the hell out of them every single day, but hey, they wrote it on paper, so hey, that's holy, that's divine, that's revered, you must respect it. My flag! You are waving a symbol of the royalty that claims to have the right to rule you and thinking that that means freedom. You are just as duped as anyone who ever bowed to a king. So, I hope that totally ruined your day. Actually, I hope it just makes you reconsider your belief system and realize that you're falling for the same crap. They just had to make it a little bit more complicated to get you to cheer for it and put up with it. Because now that you think you have some say in the matter, you'll put up with a lot worse than if a king just came along and said, I'm taking half your income and controlling every aspect of your life. No, you're not. We shall resist. Oh, well, then we'll let you vote and do all these weird representative in a House and a Senate, and they vote, and then there's a president. Oh, well, then I guess it's okay. The difference between the British royalty and the American royalty is at least a lot of people in Britain laugh at the idea of their royalty, except then they have their other royalty, the Parliament and all that, which is the same version we have. While the vast majority of Americans still, at the most deep psychological level, revere the royalty that abuses them. Maybe outgrow that crap and understand real freedom and stop worshiping human beings and stop believing in the divine right of politicians, because no matter how many scribbles and rituals and magic parchments you claim to have, it's always, from the beginning to the end, top to bottom, bullshit. Let go of your belief in royalty.
Don't forget to donate.